Hello, I'm Michael Cottingham and I'm a clinical herbalist from Silver City, New Mexico. And last time I showed you the herbal first aid kit, kind of just an overview of like the kit and what's in it. But today we're going to come and focus in on herbs for treating shock and various types of shock, spiritual shock and physical injury, or shock that results from physical injury and such. But the concept of shock is like almost any time you get a physical injury, you cut yourself, you fall down, you bang your head. The physical aspect of treating shock is often a lot easier than treating the emotional shock or the emotional body shock. So first off, one of my favorite herbs for treating shock is a plant. And I'm sure you can't see it here, but I'll give you a little vignette later on of the bottle up close. But this is Pulsatilla is the common name. The genus, the Latin name of the genus is Anemone, and the species, the particular species is tuberosa. Now, I said for the herbal online class that I try to cover herbs that are close to you or where you live. I'm pretty certain there are several hundred species of anemones worldwide, and so I think everybody who's actually in my particular online class this year can access or find an anemone. It's definitely available in commerce, both as an herbal extract and as a homeopathic, those little homeopathic tablets. So anemone or Pulsatilla is widely found in commerce, and eventually you might find a particular species of anemone growing where you live. I know there's anemones in California, several species, anemones in the Rocky Mountains, on the East Coast, in Europe. Throughout Europe there are different species of anemone. I have not used them all. I've used about 10 species of anemone as a medicine, and I prefer a fresh plant extract when making medicine from anemone. Some of its names are, the genus is anemone, the species is tuberosa, anemone tuberosa. One of the common names is Pulsatilla. It's also known as pasque flower because it often blooms wherever it's at, from Canada throughout North America into Europe, like Germany and such. It blooms around Easter time, around Pasque time. So it's also known as, in the Rocky Mountains, it's called windflower. But anemone as a medicine, it is truly an amazing plant medicine for treating shock, whether you have shock from a physical injury or whether you have shock from an emotional injury or spiritual injury. And I think people can suffer shock just as greatly from, they're in the kitchen and they cut themselves, and and they're not used to cutting themselves, and they see a lot of blood, and they can actually start to experience and go into shock. So often people get really bad news. They pick up the phone and they just heard that they've lost a relative, and they can kind of go and start to have the physiological signs of going into shock. And those types of shock are the ones that you most likely are going to treat the most often, because we have a lot of spiritual shocks in our culture and in our lives. We have a lot of emotional body shocks that we go through on our journey. And I have this basic concept that the human body consists of other forms of bodies, and they may be ethereal in nature, but at first you have your physical body, and then you have your emotional body, and then you have your spiritual body, and now some people might say there's even a fourth type, your mental body. But however you want to extrapolate and however you want to think about it, our bodies, our physical bodies, have layers to them in my belief system, And one of them is the physical body, the emotional or spiritual emotional body, and then the mental component or the mental body. And in shock situations, especially in emotional shock traumas, there appears to be a fragmentation of our bodies, of our three body types. And when the fragmentation occurs, this is a dangerous moment for our physical body. Like when your emotional body goes one way and your spiritual body goes another way, and your mind is mentally befuddled, and there's like little gaps and openings in the three or four types of bodies. What can happen is illnesses and diseases, I believe, can slip in easier into and affect the physical body. And it's all a very ethereal concept, but I have seen people suffer from hearing bad news just as greatly as if they had cut their finger off or had broken a bone. The signs of shock are distinct, and there's a loss of blood to the brain, so there's mental confusion in almost every shock situation. There's lack of focus, lack of thinking, and especially like in situations where you have emotional trauma, emotional shock. And Pulsatilla is a plant that, when taken as a fresh plant extract, it helps to reunite the various types of bodies. It helps to bring back the emotional body and the spiritual body back into the physical body, back into homeostasis. This is a profound event, because let's say, for instance, you were allergic to bees, and you have actually a chemical reaction and an anaphylactic shock from a bee sting. So you're having physiological events, you're having physiological problems going on from the bee venom. But what happens too is you start to panic, you start to become mentally befuddled, your respiration changes, your breathing becomes erratic. And so in a situation like that, they're always talking about with shock victims to talk to them, to calm them down, to assure them, to bring them back to a center place. Well, here's a plant medicine that literally does that. I mean, it literally will take somebody who's experiencing a physiological event, in this case anaphylactic shock induced by the bee venom, and so they're having all these physiological symptoms and difficulty breathing and erratic pulse. But more importantly, you need to try to calm their spirit and bring them back to a center place. Pulsatilla is a very effective medicine in bringing a person back to homeostasis or back to balance. You would, of course, in anaphylactic shock, want to use other herbs. Like in this case, I probably would use some Chinese ephedra to help their breathing and to help deal with the anaphylactic shock. But if I didn't have Chinese ephedra and only could rely on one plant in almost every shock situation, it would be Pulsatilla. Because Pulsatilla will increase blood flow to the brain, it will bring more glucose and more blood to the brain, it will stabilize the pulse, it will calm and strengthen the heart, and these are all physiological events that you really want, that you're going to have to address in serious forms of shock. Some of the things I've used Pulsatilla for is like when giving somebody 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe up to 5 drops when they've just been delivered some really bad news. They just heard that their parents passed away, or they just lost a loved one, or a good friend passed on, and they go into shock, and they're kind of a spiritual, emotional body shock. And so Pulsatilla helps to bring them back into their physical body. It doesn't eliminate the grieving, it doesn't eliminate the event, obviously, but it does help them to come back to center, to deal with it more. In almost every first aid situation, from wasp or bee stings, or from venomous creature bites, from people who have broken bones, or people who have been bitten by dogs, people who have cut their fingers or gotten serious lacerations, people who have been in car accidents, I always give them a small dose of Pulsatilla, like 1 to 5 drops, depending on their age. It's safe with children, like 1 or 2 drop dosage range. And it's a plant medicine that many books and many places you'll read about it, they'll say that Pulsatilla, an enemy, is a toxic or somewhat poisonous plant. I would suppose that maybe in large quantities, like you drank 2 or 3 ounces, you might get sick from it. But Pulsatilla is a drop-by-drop dosage type of plant when using it as a medicine to treat emotional distress or traumas or psychological traumas or depression. I always recommend Pulsatilla as 1 drop at a time, and sometimes sometimes it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 5 drops to treat most shock events. And it's really profound. You'll see that somebody who's mentally confused, mentally befuddled, can't focus, is just muttering to themselves, can't focus, can't see, they're in this fragmented shock state, that 1 or 2, 3 drops of Pulsatilla brings them right back to clarity, and they can actually speak clear again. They're back in their body, they're breathing better. So there's a wide range of applications when using the anemones, and there's other aspects of using anemone or Pulsatilla in clinical herbal medicine, especially with people. Anyways, Pulsatilla is extremely versatile, and it's probably, of all the shock remedies that you could carry in your herbal first aid kit, it will be the one that gets used the most. And so I just wanted to mention Pulsatilla a little bit. And there are other herbs that really are effective, like you can use skullcap, you can use passion flower, wild oats, and in fact I kind of like a combination of wild oats and a Pulsatilla mixture. I use fresh wild oats tincture at 70% in the formula, and then I put 30% Pulsatilla in with that. Wild oats is very nurturing, very calming to the spirit, slightly sedating, but it combines really, really well with Pulsatilla. So I often carry a formula of a wild oats Pulsatilla combination. Like I said, 70% for the wild oats and 30% for the Pulsatilla in that combination. And that's a great general anxiety shock treatment medicine, especially for children. Pulsatilla is a strong plant, and if you're paying attention to the dosage range, like 1 drop at a time, that's how you have to use Pulsatilla, 1 drop at a time. And there is a thing about Pulsatilla that if you think more is better, that's not necessarily the case. There's a strange event with Pulsatilla. So let's say you're having a panic attack because you have agoraphobia. You're afraid of the marketplace. You're afraid of people, and you're afraid to be around a large crowd of people. And so you're getting ready to go into a large crowd of people, and you think, wow, this is really making me anxious. And the dosage range of Pulsatilla is 1 to 10 drops. So I'm going to take 20 drops because I'm really anxious today. There's a peculiar thing about Pulsatilla that sometimes if you take too much of it, it will actually amplify your fear or your anxiety. So you really need to stick with the 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, 1 drop at a time dosage range with Pulsatilla. Because, I mean, if you're scared of a group of people and you think you're going to take twice as much Pulsatilla, well, you're going to probably end up being really panicky and really scared if you double your dosage way beyond the recommended threshold. Which for Pulsatilla, pure Pulsatilla, it's 1 to 10 drops up to 3 or 4 times a day. Which means that at 1 or 2 drops at a time, you can do a lot of Pulsatilla. 2 drops here, wait an hour, 2 drops here, another hour. So stay at the low end of Pulsatilla usage with yourself or with shock victims. The thing about fears and phobias and using Pulsatilla is a very profound thing. I use that with a lot of clients with helping to get who are going through withdrawal from methamphetamines or from tobacco or from relationships. Because people can definitely be addicted to relationships, and and when they don't have that relationship or they don't have that drug, they start to go into anxiety states and panic states. Pulsatilla is a great tool for helping people on that clinical level in dealing with anxieties, fears and phobias, depression. Just an amazing, amazing medicine plant. So Pulsatilla is like really key for your herbal first aid kits. There's also a lot of you know about the Bach flower remedies or the rescue remedies or flower essences. The Bach flower rescue remedy is a combination, I think, of 4 or 5 different homeopathic flower essences, and it's phenomenal. I mean, it's got close to maybe, I don't know, 50 years, 40, 50 years of usage, and it was invented in England by Dr. Bach, who first put these plants together and started treating not only humans but animals who are in shock, who are in depression, who have anxiety. So the Bach flower remedy works really well for a lot of folks are very super sensitive to herbal extracts and such, and so and animals respond really, really well to the Bach flower rescue remedy. So that's another important thing to put into your herbal first aid kit, as well as tinctures or extracts that are by themselves or contain things like passion flower, skullcap, lavender, hops, wild oats. All of those plants have the ability to calm, center, relax, bring a person back into their physical body, especially in the types of shock state where their mind becomes really erratic and really, just the thought forms are coming in so fast, and they're just thinking and thinking and speaking and speaking and thinking and thinking, and they're just like, they're in their head and they're not in the rest of their body. So passion flower, skullcap, valerian for some people, hops, wild oats. So there's all kinds of herbal sedatives, herbal nervines that work really well. There's a thing about essential oils that work instantly for bringing a person back into their body. They say, the general public, scientists, physicians and such, people who study and who think about these kind of things, they say that when you smell an essential oil, it goes straight to the brain. Its physiological effects are instantaneous. And in fact, the sense of smell, it is said that it is the only unfiltered sense that we have. Like, the sense of touch. We touch something and we process that feeling. We process that in our brain. Something is hot, and even though it may be hot and the flame burns us, we still process that information before we respond, before our physiological body responds. The sense of sight, the sense of hearing, all of these senses have filters, they have processing, they have images that go along with them and memories, and we kind of process all of the other senses except the sense of smell. Straight to the brain, straight, immediate physiological response, and that's why essential oils are great. They're a great medicinal apparatus, is because they go into the body, they affect the body instantaneously because there is no filtering of that event. So in the cases of shock, having somebody breathe some rosemary essential oil or lavender essential oil or cedar wood essential oil, you will get an instantaneous calming effect and a centering. And each essential oil has its own, its own qualities and its own medicinal aspects. But the thing is, these are my favorite. It's lavender, rosemary, and cedar. They have a history of being very spiritual oils. They're definitely very centering, very protective, and they're oils that really I have come to respect very highly of, because they bring you back into your physical body almost instantaneous. So in the case of treating, like, somebody who was just in a car accident, they're not physically injured, but say they were a passenger and they were sound asleep, and all of a sudden they wake up in a car accident, and they're befuddled. They got maybe lightly banged around, but they're in shock because all of a sudden they're upside down. The car flipped over, and they're not physically injured that greatly, if at all, but they're spiritually shook up. They're physically shook up. They're emotionally shook up. And something like 2 or 3, 4 drops of Pulsatilla, and having them breathe some cedar wood essential oil or rosemary or lavender essential oil will bring them back into their body within a minute, within a couple minutes at the most. You might have to give them another drop or 2 of Pulsatilla in 5 or 10 minutes to truly bring them back in. But it's a way of using herbs to address scatteredness and fragmentedness and to bring people back to a center space. You can also use the essential oils and the Pulsatilla extract to address fears or phobias. Let's say, once again, you're scared of the marketplace. You have agoraphobia and you don't like to be around large groups of people. It makes you confused and makes your heart race and makes you feel like you're flighty or floating and you're not in your body. Well, take 2 or 3 drops of Pulsatilla and breathe a little bit of essential oil of lavender or rosemary. And here I'm going to put a little bit of rosemary essential oil on my hand and breathe that, and then maybe take a drop or 2 of Pulsatilla extract. And now I'm not scared to go into the marketplace. My agoraphobia has been tamed a little bit, but that's kind of bad humor a little bit, but it's all good. But essential oils are instantly very calming and very centering, and coupled with a little bit of Pulsatilla, work really, really well. Some people are really big into burning incense, burning smudges. I always carry in my herbal first aid kit little bits of sweetgrass or white sage, and a lot of the people I know or a lot of the folks that I come upon, this is part of our tradition, burning cedar, burning sweetgrass, burning white sage for centering and for calming and for bringing one and for dispelling like negativity and dispelling like erratic states of being and just creating a calming kind of centering effect. But these are some of the things that I use to treat shock, especially emotional body, spiritual body, shock that often doesn't have physiological wounds, like there's no bleeding, there's no broken bones. But that type of shock, the spiritual and emotional body shock, can in the long run be very detrimental, because I believe when you have a fragmented body, when you have a fragmented sense of being, when your emotional body, physical body, spiritual body, mental body, these are all kind of fragmented and you're floaty, it is, I believe, a perfect opportunity that a lot of chronic illnesses and diseases set in during this time. So treating shock is not just restricted to like first aid, herbal first aid and situations. It actually has a greater implications in treating a lot of illnesses and diseases, because I often think of somebody who comes to me with a chronic illness or a disease, I kind of think like, when did this begin? You know, what did they suffer a trauma? Did they get a fragmented event taking place? Do we still need to doctor that? Do we still need to address that to bring them, as we work on their other problems, to bring them back, their 3 bodies, 4 bodies back together before they truly can have their chronic illness healed or their diseases addressed properly? So I think about. And so here's the Pulsatilla, the Anemone tuberosa. Here's a Nervese glycerite, which has a combination of passion flower, skullcap, lavender, hops, avena, the wild oats in glycerin. I like to have a lot of different types of glycerins in my herbal first aid kit. You know, for people, like for children and people who don't want to take any alcohol extracts. Here's a really strong formula called Downtime. It's a mixture of valerian, passion flower, skullcap, St. John's wort, hops, corydalis, and catnip. And It's very appropriately named. I mean, you take a big dose of this, like 30-40 drops before bedtime, and it's downtime for you at that point. And here's some of my favorite essential oils that I like to use for treating all kinds of different things, but in this case, in regards to shock, rosemary essential oil, lavender, and cedarwood. And very good for children and animals, and just actually everybody and anybody, is the Bach flower rescue remedy. And this one actually is quite magical. It works really well. And it's working on that ethereal flower essence spirit level. So it's really good for spirit shocks and emotional body shocks, even more so than say physical body. But if somebody cut their finger or fell down and bruised themselves or got a broken bone, definitely if you had Bach flower rescue remedy, you could treat shock that way. So these are some of my most used shock remedies on a regular basis. The Pulsatilla, nerve formulas, predominantly passion flower, skullcap, and hops and wild oats, and then the essential oils, and then the Bach flower rescue remedy.